I, a mafia boss, actually transmigrated into a worthless live-in son-in-law. In the blink of an eye, my so-called wife threw a divorce agreement right in my face, in front of everyone. Not only did she try to force me out with absolutely nothing, but she also demanded I kneel and apologize to her boyfriend. Everyone was laughing. She said, "Kneel down, and I'll reward you with 500,000. But the very next second, I grabbed a wine bottle, put all my strength into it, and smashed it right over her head. Over her piercing, distorted screams, I cursed out loud. "I'll reward you with a fat slap to the face and see if you're still acting crazy." The smell of smoke in the VIP room choked my throat. The stench of alcohol stuck in my nose, and the crystal chandelier above glared so bright it made my eyes ache. When I first opened my eyes, my knees were pressed hard against the carpet. I was gripping a fountain pen, and on the coffee table right in front of me lay a divorce agreement. Lu Rian sat dead center on the sofa, her black dress smoothed over her knees, a slim cigarette pinched between her fingers. The man next to her was in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up to his forearms, an expensive watch resting on his wrist. He looked down at me, smug smile hanging on his lips. "Gee Boda, just sign it." Lu Rian crushed her cigarette into the crystal ashtray. Her voice was piercingly cold. She said, 3 years together is already giving your G family enough face." I looked down at the agreement. The paper demanded I leave with absolutely nothing, surrender all joint marital assets, forfeit the Lu family project dividends, and admit to having mental issues during the marriage. The tip of my pen pierced right through the paper. Suddenly, memories that didn't belong to me crashed into my brain. The original owner of this body, G Boda, was from a branch of the G family. To save his father's failing company, he married into the Lu family. For 3 years, he waited on Lu Rian hand and foot, worked like a dog for her, took the blame for all her mistakes, and was treated like a stray dog by her social circle. Tonight, Lu Rian's first love, Ito Makoto, returned from abroad. She called the original owner here, to force him to sign the papers in public. Ito Makoto smiled, leaned down, and pushed a glass of liquor right in front of me. "Gee Boda, don't force yourself to act tough. It's not like Rian doesn't care about the past. As long as you get on your knees and pour me a drink, we can wrap this up nicely." Someone in the VIP room whistled and yelled, "Get on your knees." "Come on, young Master G, weren't you really good at kissing ass before? You've been leeching off the heiress for years. Bow down to her boyfriend. It's nothing to be ashamed of." Rows of phone cameras were instantly raised, the cold glow of the screens illuminating my face. Lu Rian leaned back against the sofa, her eyes filled with undisguised contempt. She said, "Kneel down, and I'll reward you with 500,000. I rolled my neck, the joints popping with a sharp crack. I thought to myself, so you really can be reborn after dying. Just a second ago, I was in that warehouse down by the docks, getting stabbed in the back. Blood had filled my throat, and the sea breeze tasted purely of rust. My name is Chen Zi. I was the top enforcer for the biggest syndicate, the one hacking down rivals for the boss. I've taken a knife for my brothers, and I've personally stuffed traitors into car trunks. But in this very second, I had become G Boda. So pathetic, so damn humiliating, getting my head shoved into the dirt. I looked up at Lu Rian. She furrowed her brows and snapped, "What the hell are you looking at?" I just let out a low chuckle. Gripping the edge of the coffee table, I slowly pulled myself up. My joints throbbed numbly as my knees left the carpet. My pants were still soaked in spilled liquor. Makoto Ito threw his arm out to block me. Pressing his palm hard against my shoulder, he sneered, "Who told you to get up?" Pale, slender fingers, not a single callus on them. I grabbed his hand and twisted hard in the opposite direction. Makoto Ito let out an ear-piercing scream. A glass knocked over, splashing red wine all over his crisp white shirt. It looked like a massive pool of dirty blood. The private room went dead silent in an instant. Lu Rian leapt to her feet. "Gee Boda." She snatched a heavy ashtray right off the table and hurled it straight at my face. I tilted my head. The ashtray barely grazed my ear, and smashed against the wall, showering the floor with shattered glass. My ear rang wildly. A warm trickle of blood slid down the side of my neck. I reached out and grabbed a wine bottle off the table, the glass icy cold against my palm. A torn label clung to the bottom of the bottle. Lu Rian's pupils shrank in terror. "What the hell are you doing?" she shrieked. I closed the distance in a single stride. I swung my arm with everything I had, and smashed the bottle right against her temple. The sickening crash drowned out the room's collective gasp. Liquor and blood splattered instantly across her face. The impact threw her entire body violently back into the sofa, her fingers clawing desperately at the cushions. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Makoto Ito stumbled backward, clutching his ruined hand, until he slammed into the coffee table. His legs gave out, and he collapsed to his knees. I casually tossed aside the jagged bottleneck. I lifted my boot and planted it right on the back of his hand. A twisted, agonizing sob forced its way out of his throat. "Gee Boda, you're completely insane." I leaned down, staring dead into his eyes. and slowly ground my heel into his flesh. I could feel the bones shifting and snapping right beneath his skin. His phone had dropped onto the carpet. The screen was still recording. I stared at it and muttered, "I am feeling incredibly pissed off right now." Two security guards suddenly burst through the door. I glanced up. I casually grabbed another glass and hurled it at the first guard's feet. Shards of glass exploded upward and embedded straight into his calf. He froze in his tracks. The second guy lunged at me. Without missing a beat, I backhanded Makoto Ito by the collar and dragged him up as a shield. I snarled, "Take one more step, and he loses this hand completely." Makoto Ito's face was a pathetic mess of snot and tears. "Don't anyone move." Lu Rian weakly clutched the sofa and propped herself up. Blood dripped from her temple, sliding past the corner of her eye. She stared at me, as if she was looking at a complete stranger. "Chiboda, do you even know what you're doing?" Ignoring her, I reached down and picked up the phone from the floor. I tapped save and forwarded it to my own email. Then I shoved the phone back into my pocket. I said, my face completely deadpan, "I know." I crunched over the broken glass and walked right up to her. Leaning down, I grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at the agreement on the table. I said, "You forced me to sign this agreement. Keeping a little evidence for myself isn't too much to ask, is it?" Lu Rian's teeth were chattering, but she still tried to act tough. She spat, "You hurt me. You're not getting away with this either." I let her go, and picked up another phone that had dropped on the floor. I dialed 911, and turned on the speaker. The dispatcher's voice came through. "Hello, what is your emergency?" I looked around at the room full of pale, terrified faces, and said, "I was forced into signing a property agreement. I acted in self-defense, and people got hurt in the process. Whether I used excessive force or not, I will be waiting right here at the scene for the police to investigate." Lu Rian's face instantly drained of color. Ito Makoto was slumped on the floor, choking on his own words. I placed the phone down on the coffee table, sat back on the sofa, and pulled out a tissue to wipe the mixed liquor and blood off my hands. "Oh, and call an ambulance." Nobody at the private room's door dared to move a muscle. I raised my eyes and snapped, "What the hell are you all staring at? If you wait until someone dies to call, it's going to be too late." By the time the wail of police sirens drifted up from downstairs, the air conditioning in the room was blowing so cold it made our skin crawl. Lu Rian had a towel pressed tight against her forehead, and the bleeding had finally stopped. She sat on the far end of the sofa, glaring daggers at me, her fingernails digging deep into her palms. Ito Makoto was huddled up against the wall. His right hand was swollen and bruised purple, and he just kept whimpering in pain. I sat by the coffee table, lining up all their phones one by one, like I was setting up a game of mahjong. Seeing who recorded what, who deleted what, and who had just secretly posted videos to the group chat, I checked them, device by device. I tapped the jagged neck of the broken bottle against the table, and barked, "You don't want that hand anymore?" The guy instantly yanked his arm back. Lu Rian gritted her teeth and hissed, "Jiboda, you really think saving a couple of videos is going to get you off the hook?" I shot her a glance, and chuckled, "I know it won't. That is exactly why I called the cops." She was completely choked up. I flipped through the original owner's memories. This was far from the first time Lu Rian had pulled a stunt like this over the past 3 years. She had once forced the original owner to take the fall for Ito Makoto's drunk driving scandal, making him issue a public statement claiming he was the one behind the wheel. She forced him to publicly apologize at the Lu family's annual gala, taking the blame for a leaked project by saying his finger slipped and sent the wrong email. All to protect her younger brother, Lu Ruoyu. She even used his father's company loans to hold him hostage, forcing him to bow his head to her, time and time again. It wasn't that the original owner didn't have a backbone. It was because he had a noose around his neck, and the Lu family was holding the other end of the rope. Too bad for them, I don't play that kind of game. The door was pushed open, and 2 police officers walked in, followed closely by paramedics. Lu Rian instantly shot up from her seat. With a trembling voice, he said, "Officer, he assaulted us on purpose. I want a medical report." I'm pressing charges to the bitter end. Ito Makoto yelled out too. He stomped on my hand and broke it. The officer scanned the floor, taking in the shattered glass, spilled liquor, and bloodstains. His gaze landed on the wound near my ear. He asked, "Who called the cops?" I raised my hand and replied, "I did." "Walk me through it," the officer said. I handed over my phone and said, "The whole build-up is right here on video." They tried to force me to sign a divorce agreement, demanding I admit to having mental issues. They wanted me to give up all my assets, and even tried to force me to my knees. She threw an ashtray at me first. "The scrape is right here." After that, I fought back. As for whether I used excessive force, I'll fully cooperate with the investigation. The officer tapped play on the video. Lu Rian's voice rang out from the phone. "Once you're done kneeling, I'll reward you with 500,000. A dead silence fell over the private room. The video kept playing. It showed Ito Makoto pinning my shoulders down, while Lu Rian grabbed the ashtray. Then, the sound of shattering glass. The officer looked up at Lu Rian. So, you threw the first punch. Lu Rian pressed her lips into a tight line. Ito Makoto started panicking. He blurted out, "That's because he attacked me first." I immediately cut in. He was illegally detaining me, blocking me from leaving the room. The officer frowned. "Alright, everyone heads to the hospital to get your injuries checked out. After that, we're going to the station to take your statements." Lu Rian took a deep breath. "I'm calling my lawyer." "Go ahead." She picked up her phone and dialed a number. The moment the call connected, her voice instantly softened into a whimpering tone. "Brother, something happened at Starport. Chiboda beat me and Makoto up." Whatever the person on the other end said, her eyes instantly turned ice cold again. She shoved the phone toward me. "My brother wants to speak with you." I took it. A man's voice came through the speaker. Deep and heavy. "Chiboda, have you caused enough of a scene tonight?" The memory of this man surfaced in my mind. Lu Riji, the eldest son of the Lu family, and the actual shot caller of the Lu group. A man with hands colder than his ledgers. I replied, "Not even close." The other end of the line went dead silent for 2 seconds before he spoke. "You put your hands on my sister, and on someone from the Ito family. There is no way in hell you're walking away from this." I looked right at Lu Rian and let out a laugh. "Then let's not walk away from it." Lu Ruji's voice grew even darker. He asked, "What exactly do you want?" I said, "I want a divorce," and Lu Rian leaves with absolutely nothing. Lu Rian's head snapped up in shock. A short, mocking scoff came through the phone. "Are you still drunk?" I switched the phone to my other hand and said, "I don't drink what other people hand me." Lu Ruji stayed silent. I continued, "Tonight, your precious sister had someone spike my drink. You wanted me to sign it, then film some sick video of me making a fool of myself, just waiting for me to be thrown into the psych ward. And then snatch the shares under my name. How about I have the cops bag up that glass right now?" The towel in Lu Rian's hand hit the floor. Ito Makoto's face went completely pale. The officer immediately looked over at the wine glasses on the coffee table and asked, "Which glass?" I pointed straight at the one on the left. "There's a little bit of white powder left on the rim. And I'm not just guessing here. You can smell the spiked garbage in the drink." When I first woke up, the back of my tongue was completely numb. My stomach felt like lead. They almost managed to force that crap down this body's throat. The officer put on his gloves and dropped the glass straight into an evidence bag. Lu Rian could barely stand, gripping the edge of the couch as she stammered, "Chiboda, stop spouting such nonsense." I stared her down and said, "Then why the hell are you shaking?" Her eyelashes gave a violent flutter. Over the phone, Lu Riji finally spoke up. "Chiboda, until we get to the bottom of this, don't you dare go throwing wild accusations around." I brought the phone right up to my mouth and said, "You listen here, Lu. You'd better find a damn good lawyer. Fast, because I'm going straight to the press." Lu Ruji's voice turned ice cold. He demanded, "You really dare to drag the Lu family down with you?" I looked down at the blood covering my own hands. I replied with a deadpan voice, "I don't give a damn. I'm already drowning here. What the hell do I have left to be afraid of? Mutual destruction is a hell of a lot better than letting you win." With that said, I hung up the phone. The hallway was packed with club staff. Lu Rian was being propped up by the medics. As she brushed past me, she dropped her voice to a vicious whisper. "Chiboda, you're going to come crawling back on your knees to beg me." I stopped right in my tracks, leaned in real close, and told her, "You better remember this. Tonight was just the appetizer." Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't dare say another word. The elevator doors slid open, and my face stared back at me from the silver mirrors. Blood was still oozing from my ear, but my eyes, they were burning with a terrifying intensity. This body is way too damn frail. Barely an ounce of muscle on me. No calluses on my hands, not a single battle scar on my back. But that's fine. I've got plenty of dirty tricks up my sleeve. Anyone who tries to step on me, I'm dragging them straight down to hell with me. You force a noose around my neck, I'll tighten it right around yours. The sharp stench of hospital bleach stung my nose. The harsh white fluorescent lights made the walls look sickly and cold. Faint streaks of water were smeared across the floor tiles. I ended up getting 3 stitches on the side of my ear. The doctor gave me a few sideways glances while taping up the gauze, but he kept his mouth shut. Lu Rian had to get her wounds cleaned out, taking 4 stitches right to her forehead. She had a mild concussion, and Ito Makoto fractured his right index finger. Severe soft tissue damage in his hand. Compared to them, my injuries were nothing. All things considered, I'd say I came out on top. The lawyers showed up fast, and the one sent by the G family was my so-called older brother, Chi Bo-chan. He walked in wearing a sharp gray suit. His tie was perfectly straight. When he walked in, the first thing he looked at was the gauze on my ear. Then he looked at the bloody scratches on the back of my hand. "Did you really bust Lu Rian's head open?" I looked up at him and said, "What? Are you disappointed?" Chi Bo-chan sat down next to me, adjusted his glasses, and said, "I was just afraid you dropped dead too fast." I laughed. And here I thought the G family only knew how to sell off their sons. He looked at me and said, "You never had the guts to talk to me like this before." I leaned back against the wall and said, "The old Ji Boda is dead." Ji Bo-chang's brow twitched. "Don't say that in your police statement." I laughed out loud. This guy wasn't stupid. In the original owner's memories, Ji Bo-chang wasn't his blood brother. He was the heir to the main Ji family. Back when the original owner's father's company went into crisis, he was the one who pushed to marry the original owner off to the Liu family, all to get their investment. His hands weren't clean, but he wasn't stupid enough to be in bed with the Liu family either. Ji Bo-chang handed me a phone and said, "Your old phone was tapped by the Liu family." I had someone swap out the SIM card. I took it, and asked, "What's the catch?" He said, "Just don't drag the Ji family down with you." I turned the phone on and said flatly, "What's in it for me?" Ji Bo-chang stared at me for a few seconds, then lowered his voice. "Liu Rian is holding a 12% guarantee agreement for your father's company. She still has the Ji family by the throat. You laid your hands on her tonight. So Liu Ruji is definitely going to play that card." I turned to look at him and said, "So, if you're going to raise hell, raise it so high that the Liu family won't even dare to breathe." Now that was music to my ears. I tapped open the video that had just been sent to my email, then pulled up the cloud sync logs. I said, "I need you to look into 3 things for me. First, who booked the private room tonight? Second, who sent the drinks? And third, exactly what blame has Liu Rian forced the original owner to take over the past 3 years?" Ji Bo-chang frowned. "The original owner." I looked at him and said, "I mean, me." He didn't press further. He just asked, "How soon do you need this?" I replied, "Before dawn." Ji Bo-chang let out a short laugh and said, "Do you think I'm some kind of god?" I stood up, patted his shoulder, and said, "Number. You're a businessman, and businessmen are terrified of taking a loss. You've already placed your bet, so stop pretending you don't have the chips." Ji Bo-chang's smile vanished. He spoke, emphasizing every single word. "Ji Boda, don't treat me like I'm your subordinate." I leaned in, stared right at him, and lowered my voice. "And don't treat me like a sacrificial pawn." The eyes behind his lenses darkened. At the other end of the corridor, Liu Rian walked out, being supported by Liu Ruji. Liu Ruji was even colder in person than on the phone, his suit buttoned up to the very top. A string of black prayer beads hung around his wrist. When he saw me, he didn't even break his stride. Ito Makoto's parents were there too. Makoto's mother wailed, "That's him. It's this lunatic who crushed my son's hand like that." His father pointed a shaking finger at me, gritting his teeth. "I want him in jail." I didn't move an inch. I waited for them to finish cursing. Then, Liu Ruji walked right up to me, and said, "Ji Boda, let's talk." I replied, "The lawyers are here. The police are here. Just spit it out." Liu Ruji's eyes were practically burning with suppressed rage. He clenched his jaw. "The fact is, you assaulted someone tonight. Releasing that video will only humiliate the Liu family, and drag the Ji family down with us. You want a divorce? Fine. I can have Rian compensate you with 10 million. Liu Rian was standing behind him, her eyes red. "Brother," she started. Liu Ruji just held up a hand, and she immediately shut her mouth. I looked at the 2 siblings, shrugging. 10 million to buy my silence? He stared back. "To buy your dignity." I laughed. I said, "Dignity? Do I look like I give a damn about dignity?" Liu Ruji's face completely stiffened. I pulled out my phone, and showed him the close-up footage of the spiked wine glass. I told him, the glass has already been sent to the lab, and I had someone back up the security footage from the private room. You only have 2 options right now. First, pray the lab doesn't find any illegal substances. Second, find someone willing to take the fall for your precious sister. Liu Rian went completely pale. "Ji Boda, don't you dare try to frame me." I turned to look right at her. "When you pushed that glass toward me yourself, your left ring finger touched the rim. You just had your nails touched up, and one of the little sequins fell off. It got stuck on the coaster." She instinctively looked down at her hand. Liu Ruji looked too, right there on her ring finger. A single silver sequin was clearly missing. I put my phone away and smiled. "Don't be scared. I mean, they might not even find any fingerprints, right?" Liu Ruji glared at me. "What exactly do you want?" "I want a divorce," I said. "I want the assets that are rightfully mine. I want a public apology from Liu Rian. And I want Ito Makoto to admit to wrecking my marriage and setting me up." From the back of the room, Ito Makoto yelled, "In your dreams." I looked right past Liu Ruji, straight at him. "Oh, is your hand not hurting anymore?" Ito Makoto snapped his mouth shut instantly. His eye twitched. Liu Ruji fell silent for a few seconds, then said, "You don't have a single piece of evidence proving that Ito Makoto got involved." I just tapped to play another video. On the screen, Ito Makoto had his arm wrapped around Liu Rian's waist, whispering right into her ear. "Rian, if you can get him to sign this, you'll be completely free." Liu Rian reached out to block the camera lens, smiling without a care in the world. She said, "Relax. I won't just make him sign it. I'll make him get on his knees and sign it for me." The air grew heavy at those words. Ji Bo-chang stood right behind me, his breath catching in his throat. After finishing the video, Lu Ruji gripped his prayer beads tightly. The beads clicked together, making a sharp, faint sound. I shoved my phone back into my pocket and said, "Liu Kang, don't talk to me about dignity. Dignity is the absolute last thing I care about." I took a step forward, leaning right into his ear, and whispered, "I've seen plenty of big shots in my time. Right before they met their end, they still obsessed over saving face. I just wonder how long Boss Liu can keep up his precious act." Lu Ruji turned his head to glare at me, and I added with a smirk, "It's a lawful society now. I don't take lives." His eyes grew even colder. I stepped back, and said, "Besides, people can only pay off their debts if they stay breathing, right?" By daybreak, the security footage from Starlight Club had blown up in certain circles. It had nothing to do with it. Some rich kid from the private room last night had a slip of the finger, and accidentally dropped the clip of Lu Rian, forcing me to my knees into his group chat of trust fund buddies. Someone forwarded it, and it kept spreading until it landed right in the laps of the gossip blogs. The video didn't catch me fighting back. It only caught Lu Rian saying, "Get on your knees and I'll tip you 500,000. Half an hour later, the Lu family's PR team released a statement. They claimed the video was taken out of context, framing it as a simple emotional dispute between a married couple. They added that Lu Rian was severely injured and had already gone to the cops. The comment section was a complete bloodbath, filled with paid trolls pushing their own narrative. They said I was a deadbeat who leeched off her for 3 years, and that I only put my hands on a woman because I didn't get a payout from the divorce." Ji Bo-chang handed me the tablet and said, "Lu Ruji has made his move." I was sitting at the dining table in the old Ji family estate, an untouched bowl of porridge sitting right in front of me. The old man of the Ji family sat at the head of the table, his hands resting on his walking cane. With a dark, stormy look on his face, he spat out, "Ji Boda. You've blown this way out of proportion. This does the Ji family no favors." I picked up my spoon and lazily stirred my porridge twice. I said, "Look, old man. When you shipped me off to the Lu family back then, you told me that would do the Ji family some favors, too." He slammed his cane violently against the floor and barked, "Watch your tone." Several uncles around the table immediately chimed in. "Ji Boda, you have no business messing with the Lu family. You are a part of the Ji family. You need to put the bigger picture first. Just swallow your pride and let it go." Someone else added, "Besides, you raised your hand against a woman. How do you think that makes us look? You'll never win the court of public opinion." I dropped my spoon. The porcelain clinked sharply against the bowl as one fired back. "Bullshit. So it's perfectly fine when she forces me to my knees. But the second I strike back, I'm the ultimate villain?" Nobody said a word. I swept my gaze across their faces. The previous owner of this body had eaten countless meals at this very table, always with his head bowed. While the uncles talked business, he was just the guy pouring their drinks. When his cousins mocked him for marrying into his wife's family, he wouldn't even dare reach for the meat with his chopsticks. But I'm not him. I looked at Ji Bo-chang and said, "Files." Ji Bo-chang pushed a document folder across the table. Old Master Ji frowned. "What files?" I opened the folder and pulled out the first page. I spoke up. 3 years ago, the Lu family invested 20 million into the Ji family business. The catch was that I had to marry Lu Rian. But after the wedding, the Lu family slipped 3 bad debts into the Ji family's supply chain. The Ji family ended up shouldering 60 million in financial risk for them. Old Master Ji's face instantly dropped. I pulled out the second page and continued. "Last year, when the Lu family's project leaked, I was made the scapegoat. In reality, it was Lu Ruoyu who secretly sent those emails to their competitors. The IP logs are right here." One of the uncles slammed his hand on the table. "Where the hell did you get this evidence? This is absolute nonsense." I didn't even bother looking at him. I casually replied, "Keep yelling, and I'll read out the bank statements from when you embezzled company funds to buy a house for your mistress 2 years ago." His mouth instantly clamped shut. His cheek twitched. Ji Bo-chang just lowered his head to sip his tea, barely able to hide his smirk. Old Master Ji stared dead at me. "What exactly are you trying to do?" I pushed the files to the center of the table. I looked at them. "The Ji family can either keep being the Lu family's lapdogs, or you can bite back with me." The veins on the old master's hands bulged. He frowned deeply. "Are you absolutely certain you can pull this off?" I replied simply, "No." I stood up. "But when it comes to the things I want to do, I never wait for 100% guarantee." Just then, footsteps echoed from the dining room entrance. The Ji family butler hurried in. "Old master, people from the Lu family are here." Right on cue, Lu Ruji walked through the doors with a lawyer, followed closely by 2 bodyguards in black suits. He didn't even glance at anyone else. His gaze locked straight onto me. "Ji Boda, did you post that video?" I fired back, "Nope." He slammed a legal notice onto the table, and sneered, "The Lu family will be suing you for intentional assault, defamation, and extortion. If you delete the video right now and sign a non-disclosure agreement, we can drop the assault charges." A few of the Ji family uncles looked visibly panicked. They were obviously terrified. I just picked up the legal notice, glanced at it for a second, and ripped it right in half. The torn paper fluttered onto the table. The bodyguard behind Lu Ruji immediately stepped forward. I slowly looked up. You really want to start a fight inside the Ji family's home? Lu Ruji raised a hand, signaling his bodyguard to stand down. His voice was dead calm. Ji Boda, do you actually think you're some kind of tough guy now? I walked right up to his face and shrugged. Tough? I couldn't be tough even if I tried. Didn't I literally get on my knees for you last night? He glared at me. Then you should know. When a man who has been forced to his knees finally stands back up, they'll fall even harder. I leaned in close to him and said, Liu Kang, the glass your sister spiked. The lab results will be out this afternoon. His pupils instantly constricted. And the records of your brother, Lu Ruoyu, emailing your competitors? I have those too. Doesn't your Lu family just love putting out public statements? Let me help you write the next one. The prayer beads in Lu Ruji's hand clattered as he crushed them in his grip. He gritted his teeth and said, Are you declaring war on the Lu family? I chuckled and said, Didn't you already come here to deliver the declaration yourself? Just then, my phone buzzed. A message came through from an unknown number. Don't trust Ji Bochong. His people took the club's security footage last night. I looked up at Ji Bochong. He was still sitting at the table, holding his teacup, his eyes meeting mine through the rising steam. I kept the phone hidden in my palm, not showing a single hint of emotion. Interesting. Looks like there's a wolf hiding among the dogs. Lu Ruji turned to leave, but I called out to stop him. Liu Kang, go back and tell Lu Royan to rewrite that divorce agreement. He stopped in his tracks and asked, Write what? I said, write that she cheated. Write that she leaves with absolutely nothing. Lu Ruji turned around, shooting me a piercing, cold glare. He said, She'll never sign that. I smirked and replied, Then I'll break her until she does. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, the lab results came back. The glass contained traces of zolpidem. The dose wasn't lethal, but it was more than enough to cause severe drowsiness and confusion. The police opened an investigation, and the Lu family's PR team immediately changed their tune. They claimed a server at the club acted alone, and that Lu Royan had absolutely no idea. The club manager was thrown under the bus to take the fall. I watched the news as the manager bowed his head in apology. A completely cold cup of tea resting by my hand, Ji Bochong sat across from me and said, Lu Ruji moved fast. An extra 200,000 just dropped into that server's bank account. The transfer came from the club's outsourcing company. It was routed through 3 different shell accounts. Without even looking up, I said, Find out who's actually running that outsourcing company. Already did. The legal representative on paper is just some 70-year-old guy. And find out who's backing the old guy. Ji Bochong pinched the bridge of his nose and sighed. You really think I'm some kind of god, don't you? I looked straight at him and asked. The security footage from the club last night. Did you take it? His fingers froze. The room fell dead silent. Outside the window, tires crunched against the cobblestone street with a soft rustling sound. Ji Bochong raised his eyes and asked, Who told you that? Just tell me if you did it or not. He set his teacup down. I did. I instantly shot up from my seat, grabbed him by the collar, and slammed him against the wall. The teacup knocked over, dark tea dripping down the edge of the table. Ji Bochong's back hit the wall with a heavy thud, letting out a muffled groan. His glasses were knocked crooked across his nose. The bodyguards at the door immediately moved to step in. I glanced back over my shoulder. Get out. 2 of them looked at Ji Bochong. He forced the words out through gritted teeth. Get out. Close the door. I glared at him. Give it to me. Ji Bochong swallowed hard. I only took it because I was afraid the Lu family would destroy it first. Cut the bullshit. My grip tightened. I snarled. You're the one who leaked that video. You tampered with it. His breathing grew heavy. I slammed my fist into the wall, right next to his head. My knuckles scraped raw, sending a chunk of plaster crumbling to the floor. I'm going to ask you one last time. Where is the original footage? Ji Bochong squeezed his eyes shut. In the safe. Password. Your birthday. I let out a dry laugh. You really know how to play the devoted brother, don't you? Ji Bochong stared back at me. His voice raspy. I wasn't trying to hurt you. The original video shows the whole fight. If I leaked the whole thing, you'd be in deep trouble too. I shot back. Whether to leak it, or how to leak it, is none of your damn business. It's not your call to make. I shoved off him. He adjusted his glasses, looking pale and shaken. Ji Boda, you're acting like a completely different person. I wiped the blood off the back of my hand. Then you should consider yourself lucky, I sneered, that this new version of me is even willing to talk to you. Inside the safe, the original footage was saved on a hard drive. I plugged it into my laptop. The video started from the moment I walked into that private room. The old me, being forced to chug drinks. Forced to his knees. Ito Makoto sliding the contract across the table. Lu Ryan casually lighting a cigarette. I scrubbed back 10 minutes. A waiter brought the drinks in. Ito Makoto stood up, his back to the camera. He hovered over my glass for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds. That was all it took. He clipped that exact moment. Zoomed in, you could clearly see a tiny packet of white powder slip right out of his sleeve. Ji Bo-chan stood over my shoulder. He gave a slow nod. This is absolute proof against Ito. It's not enough, I muttered. There's no footage of Lu Rian actually handling the stuff. Ji Bo-chan frowned. She could just play dumb. I nodded. Exactly. Which is why we need to make those two tear each other apart. Later that night, I went to the Ito family hospital. Ito Makoto was staying in a VIP suite, with two heavy hitters guarding the front door. I obviously wasn't going to just walk right in. There was a fire escape behind the inpatient wing. Right outside the 8th floor window, there was a maintenance platform. This old body of mine was pathetically weak. By the time I climbed all the way up, the muscles in my arms were screaming in agony. Freezing wind whipped down my collar, turning the sweat on my back to ice. I forced open a window that hadn't been locked completely. Makoto Ito was sitting in his hospital bed, on the phone. Lu Rian, you have to cover for me. Now that things blew up, you expect me to take the fall all by myself? I stood frozen right outside his window. My phone was recording everything. Through the receiver, Lu Rian's voice came through. It wasn't very loud, but, thankfully, it was crystal clear. She said, I only told you to scare him a little. I never told you to spike his drink. Makoto cursed under his breath and shot back. At the crap, you were the one who said to get him on video right after he signed the papers. To make sure he could never bounce back from this. Lu Rian went dead silent for a second, then said, Makoto, you need to calm down. My brother will handle it. Handle it, my ass. My arm is completely busted, and the whole internet is tearing me apart for stealing another man's wife. And now you're trying to wash your hands of me? Lu Rian's voice suddenly pitched up, sharp and defensive. You never should have touched that glass in the first place. Makoto yelled right back at her. Would I have even dared if you hadn't given me the green light? I just stood there outside the window, the chilly wind making my eyes sting and dry out. The recording timer hit 2 minutes and 10 seconds. That was enough. Just as I was about to slip away, the door to his hospital room suddenly swung open. A caregiver rolled her cart inside, looked up, and spotted me right there at the window. Her eyes went wide with shock. Without missing a beat, I vaulted right through the window and straight into the room. Makoto whipped his head around, and the second he saw me, all the color drained from his face. Ji Boda? I calmly shut the window behind me, dusted off my hands, and flashed him a tight smile. Sounded like a pretty intense chat you two were having. He panicked and lunged for the nurse call button. I instantly snatched an apple from the nightstand and shoved it right into his mouth. His entire body jerked in pain, and tears immediately streamed down his face. MMPH. The caregiver opened her mouth to scream, but I delivered a swift chop to her neck, knocking her out cold. I casually waved my phone in the air, the screen still flashing that it was recording. I let out a low chuckle. Take a wild guess. If I were to hand this little audio file over to the cops right now, you really think Lu Rian would come to your rescue? Makoto was gagging on the apple, his eyes bulging and completely bloodshot. I yanked the apple out of his mouth. He gasped violently for air, choking out, What the hell do you want? I leaned in close, staring right into his eyes, and said, Tomorrow morning, you are going to post a public statement. You'll admit to wrecking my marriage. You'll confess that you and Lu Rian teamed up to force me into signing those papers. And you'll state that you were the one who messed with my drink, and that she knew all about it. He shook his head frantically. No way, I can't post that. If my old man finds out, he'll actually skin me alive. I pinned his hand down and whispered firmly, Makoto Ito, I think you're severely confused right now. I'm not negotiating with you. I'm giving you an ultimatum. He started shaking uncontrollably. The heavy thud of bodyguards' footsteps echoed from the hallway. I let go of him, and pushed the window open. Just before I slipped back out, I threw one last glance over my shoulder. Makoto, you should know damn well, Lu Rian is going to dump you. Ito Makoto didn't even put out a statement. Big mistake. I never imagined he'd be such a coward. The next morning, the Ito family fired off a legal notice first, claiming he and Lu Rian were just old friends. They accused me of malicious slander, and demanded all related posts be wiped from the internet. Half an hour later, the Lu Corporation shared their post. Both families ganged up, and threw all the dirt right back at me. Someone leaked a story saying that for the 3 years I lived with the Lu family, I mooched off my wife for everything. That I racked up secret gambling debts, and had a long history of mental instability. That's why I turned violent at the divorce proceeding. They even attached a photo of the original host, standing outside a psychiatric clinic. I stared at that photo for a long time. He wasn't insane. Lu Rian tormented him so much he couldn't sleep for nights on end, until he eventually checked himself in for help. And now they were weaponizing even that. Ji Bo-chan watched my face. Saying nothing, I grabbed my car keys and said, To the Lu Corporation. Right now, the Lu Group's headquarters sat dead in the center of the city, its glass walls glaring in the sunlight. A massive swarm of reporters was blocking the entrance. The moment I stepped out of the car, camera flashes absolutely swallowed me. Mr. G, Is it true you have a mental illness? Did you attack Ms. Liu because your extortion attempt failed and you lost your temper? During your 3-year marriage, did you really have zero income? Ji Bocheng's bodyguards moved in to block them. I raised my hand, waving them off. I walked right up to the cameras and ripped the gauze off my ear, exposing the raw stitches and the wound underneath. I looked at them and said, "Take a good look. Liu Rian did this to me with an ashtray." The reporters instantly erupted in a frenzy. I pulled out my tablet and played the video from the VIP room. Liu Rian's arrogant voice, "Finish kneeling, and I'll reward you with 500,000. blared through the megaphone at the building's entrance. The crowd went dead silent for a split second, before absolutely exploding. The Liu Corporation's security guards rushed out to stop me. "Break it up! Break it up! No press allowed on the premises." I shoved the tablet into a nearby reporter's hands. "Here, copy it all you want." A guard lunged to snatch it away, but I caught his wrist, twisted it back, and slammed him face first into the concrete. Another guard charged at me. I sidestepped, stuck my leg out, and tripped him hard. I held back from doing real damage. After all, cameras were everywhere. I turned straight to the lenses and declared, "I think I need to clear something up. As for the Liu family's claim that I have a history of mental illness, it is absolute, total bullshit. Furthermore, as a fully competent adult of sound mind, I refuse to settle this privately. I won't accept mediation, and I sure as hell won't take their hush money." Right then, Liu Rian stormed out of the building. She was wearing sunglasses, with a fresh patch of gauze taped to her temple. Her lawyers and bodyguards trailed closely behind her. "Chi Boda, haven't you made enough of a scene?" I looked her dead in the eye. Not even close. She pulled off her sunglasses. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her lips were completely bloodless. She snapped angrily, "How far are you going to push me?" I let out a laugh. "You're asking me?" I took the tablet back and tapped on another video. It was a video from 6 months ago, showing the original owner being forced to apologize at the Liu Corporate Annual Gala. Liu Rian was standing on the stage, announcing that the project leak was caused by Ji Boda's personal negligence, and that the Liu Corporation would hold him fully accountable. In the crowd below, people were calling him a piece of trash, and someone even threw their drink at him. The original owner just kept his head down, his white shirt completely soaked through. His hands were gripping the microphone, but he couldn't utter a single word. I looked up at Liu Rian and said, "So, who is pushing who here?" She opened her mouth to speak, but the reporters immediately shoved their microphones toward her. "Ms. Liu, is this video authentic?" "Ms. Liu, was the project leak really Mr. G's fault?" Liu Rian's breathing instantly became ragged. She looked at me, and in a voice so low that only I could hear, she pleaded, "Chi Boda, please, don't do this." I took a step forward, and she instinctively backed away. That exact movement was captured by every single camera. I looked down at her and asked, "Are you scared now?" Her sunglasses slipped off and fell to the ground. "The lens is cracking." I'm not," she stammered. "Then stop shaking," I replied. She froze, her entire body going stiff. I leaned in close and whispered, "Liu Rian, you used to love it when you watched me kneel, didn't you?" She pursed her lips tightly. I raised my hand, pointing straight at the steps of the building entrance, and said, "Now, get on your knees." A loud gasp rippled through the crowd. Liu Rian's face turned deathly pale. Her lawyer hurriedly interjected, "Mr. G, this is public humiliation." I looked right into the cameras and said, "When she forced me to kneel, it was called a marital dispute. But when I tell her to kneel, it's public humiliation." The reporters shoved their cameras even closer. Liu Rian clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. Her eyes were red and teary, but not out of remorse. It was pure hatred from having her dignity trampled on. "Chi Boda, I will never kneel." I nodded. "Fine." I turned back to the reporters and said, From the tablet, an audio recording of a phone call between Makoto Ito and Liu Rian began to play. Makoto Ito's voice rang out. "You told me to wait until he signed the papers before recording the video, to make sure he could never bounce back from this for the rest of his life. If you hadn't given the green light, do you think I would have dared?" Liu Rian suddenly lunged forward to snatch the tablet. I grabbed her wrist. I didn't even squeeze that hard, just enough to keep her half a step away. Her fingertips were mere inches from the screen, but she couldn't reach it no matter what. The reporters around us just completely lost it. Questions were hurled at us, one after another. Liu Group's security guards tried desperately to hold them back, but they couldn't stop the surging crowd at all. Even random passersby started crowding around. Liu Rian glared at me with absolute murder. In her eyes, there was none of her usual condescending arrogance, only sheer panic. And the sudden realization that the very blade she had sharpened herself was now stabbing right back into her own flesh. I let go of her and said, "Liu Rian, it's fine if you don't kneel right now." I quietly put the tablet away. That evening, the police summoned Makoto Ito. The Ito family's doorstep was swarmed with reporters. Makoto Ito walked out wearing a mask, his right arm in a sling, keeping his head down as he tried to duck into the car. Someone yelled, asking if he was the homewrecker. He didn't answer, Someone else asked if Lou Rian was the one who ordered the drugging. He paused for just a second, before his dad violently shoved him into the car. But that split-second reaction was enough to fuel internet gossip for 3 straight days. Lou Group's stock price plummeted at the opening bell. Business partners sent urgent letters overnight, questioning the risks. Lou Ruji was busy doing damage control, with absolutely no time left to cosplay as some innocent saint. But he wasn't exactly sitting idle either. At 10 p.m., several banks that my father's company had been working with for years suddenly sent notices all at the exact same time, citing an upgraded guarantee risk level. They demanded the company provide additional collateral within a strict deadline. The G family's old estate was ablaze with lights. Several of my uncles were surrounding Grandpa, shouting, "I told you we should have stopped G Boda from messing around. The Liu family is trying to completely cut off our cash flow. Make him go apologize. Make him do it right now." Right as I walked through the door, a teacup violently shattered right at my feet. Grandpa's face was livid as he roared, "Are you happy now?" I stared down at the broken pieces, let out a cold laugh, and said, "The Liu family already has their knife at our throats. Instead of figuring out how to fight back, you're all in a rush to tear your own family apart." One of my uncles charged at me, pointing his finger right in my face, screaming, "If it wasn't for you, how the hell would the G family have ended up in this absolute mess?" I grabbed his finger, and brutally snapped it downward. His knees buckled instantly as he let out an agonizing scream. I enunciated every single word. "Point at me one more time. I dare you." His face was violently twitching in pain. Grandpa slammed his hand on the table and yelled, "G Boda, you let him go this instant." I let go. My uncle cradled his hand, stumbling backward, cursing under his breath over and over. "You're a maniac, an absolute maniac." I slowly turned my gaze to Ji Bo-chan, and asked, "Who's the lead on the bank's side?" Ji Bo-chan handed me the files. He replied, "Huntai Bank. The vice president's last name is Bai. He's got very deep ties with Liu Ruji." I flipped through a couple of pages and said, "Vice President Bai's son took a massive payout from one of the Liu Group's funds last year." Ji Bo-chan nodded grimly. 30 million, invested straight into a dummy tech shell company. I just smiled. I said, "Organize the materials, and send them straight to the regulatory bureau's inbox." Ji Bo-chan froze for a second. He asked, "Right now?" Old man Ji frowned. "You're dragging the Bai family into this too?" I looked right at him and said, "He went for my throat first. Am I still supposed to show him mercy?" Nobody said a word. Ji Bo-chan lowered his voice. "The chain of evidence isn't complete. It'll only make him sweat a little. It won't necessarily bring him down." He said, "That's enough." I sat back on the couch, enunciating every single word. "I don't need to bring him down. I just need him too scared to sign off on Liu Ruji's early loan recall papers." Ji Bo-chan stared at me. His eyes shifted. In the original owner's memories, these family feuds were like a game of chess. Everyone cared about playing by the rules, keeping up appearances, and always leaving a way out. But back when I was hustling at the docks to make a living, there was none of this complicated bullshit. If the other guy dares to pull a knife on you, you break the hand holding it. At 1 in the morning, word leaked from inside Huntai Bank. Vice President Bai was called in for questioning. By 2 in the morning, the notice to pull the loan was suspended. The way the G family looked at me completely changed. Their fear was tainted with a hint of greed. They realized that since I was a mad dog that actually bites, they all wanted to be the ones holding my leash. Old man G cleared his throat and said, "G Boda, you did a pretty good job this time." I rolled my eyes and said, "You really are two-faced, aren't you, old man?" "Save the compliments. We both know they're fake." He choked on his words. Ji Bo-chan handed his phone to me and said, "Liu Rian is looking for you." Her name was flashing on the screen. I answered it and put it on speaker. Her voice was incredibly hoarse. "G Boda, let's meet up." I didn't say a word. She kept going. "I know you hate me, but letting things blow up like this doesn't do anyone any good. Let's just talk. Those conditions you brought up, I'm willing to compromise." I let out a laugh. I asked, "Compromise how?" Her breath hitched. She said, "I can give you money. We can even negotiate the shares." I replied, "And what if I want you to get down on your knees and apologize in public?" She went completely silent. I waited. A few seconds passed. Then she said, "G Boda, don't push me into making this ugly." I looked around at the room full of G family members and asked, "Didn't you lose all sense of shame a long time ago?" The sound of a glass shattering echoed through the phone. She hissed through her teeth, "You really want to force me to my knees, don't you?" "No." I leaned back against the couch and said, "I want exactly what you did when you humiliated me back then. And now, I'm making you pay it all back in front of everyone, one piece at a time." Her voice trembled as she spoke. You didn't used to be like this." I closed my eyes. The image of him kneeling in that private room flashed through my mind. Flashed to him sitting on the bathroom floor in the middle of the night, burying his face in his knees. That pathetic state of listening to a dripping faucet all night long. I opened my eyes and said, "The G Boda you used to know, is already dead. You all killed him." Liu Rian didn't say a word. Only the faint sound of her breathing came through the phone. I hung up. A dead silence fell over the G family. Jibo-chan asked, "Are you really not leaving any room for old feelings?" I looked at him and said, "Old feelings?" I tossed my phone back onto the table. I said, "You want a dead man to care about old feelings? Aren't you afraid his ghost will come knocking on your door at midnight?" Lu Ruyan still came. Noon the next day, she came to the G family's old estate all alone. No lawyers, no bodyguards either. She wore a light-colored trench coat, looking a whole size thinner. As she stood at the doorway, the wind blew her hair against her lips. She reached up to brush it away, her fingertips trembling slightly. The entire G family was in the living room. She saw me, and her footsteps stopped. I sat on the couch, gave her a nod, and said, "Go ahead." Lu Ruyan glanced at the others. She said, "I want to talk to you alone." I let out a laugh. I said, "When you forced me to kneel back then, you sure didn't clear the room." That forced layer of composure on her face finally cracked. Old man G spoke up. "Ruyan, take a seat." Lu Ruyan didn't sit down. She pulled a document out of her bag. She said, "Say new divorce agreement. I'm willing to pay you 30 million in compensation. The Lu Group's project dividends will be settled according to our marriage agreement, and I can withdraw the guarantee on your father's company." The eyes of several uncles in the G family lit up. I didn't take it. I just said coldly, "A public apology." Her fingers tightened around the paper. She said, "I can release a statement. I'll say the breakdown of our marriage was a mutual fault." I picked up the ashtray on the coffee table and slowly turned it in my hands. Seeing the ashtray, her shoulders flinched. I smirked. "Mutual fault?" She bit her lip. "Gee Boda, the Lu Group has tens of thousands of employees. Making me publicly admit to cheating. How is that any different from publicly crucifying the Lu family?" I asked. "And what are you doing here?" Her eyes welled up with tears. She said, "I came to beg you." Everyone in the living room went completely quiet. Lu Ruyan lowered her head. Her voice was barely a whisper as she said, "I know I treated you horribly before. I admit I went too far. I was just so used to you always giving in to me. I was so used to you taking it, that I just kept pushing my luck." I stared at the top of her head. Sounded like she finally realized she messed up. But she never said what she did wrong. She just admitted she went a little overboard. Not a single word about the hell the original owner went through. She just wanted to cut her losses. I stood up, and walked right up to her. She looked up at me, her eyes shimmering with tears. Gripping the edge of the document, she whispered, "Chiboda, there's no way we can start over. But at least, let's not tear each other apart." I reached out, and took the agreement from her hands. She let out a sigh of relief. The very next second, I ripped the damn thing right in half. The sharp sound of tearing paper echoed harshly through the living room. Lu Ruyan froze. I tossed the shredded paper into the trash, and said, "That's not how you beg." The color drained from her face, inch by inch. Old man G furrowed his brows. "Gee Boda, don't take this too far." I turned my head and snapped, "Shut the hell up." The old man shot up from his seat, shaking with rage. Jibo-chan immediately grabbed his arm to hold him back. I turned my attention back to Lu Ruyan and said, "You want to negotiate? Fine." I pointed toward the courtyard outside. "Go kneel in the yard for 30 minutes. Then record a public apology video." Her eyes widened in shock. "You want me to kneel? Here at the G family estate?" I let out a cold laugh. "What? Feeling wronged?" Her breathing grew heavy. "Chiboda, you're crossing the line." The smile vanished from my face. I glared at her. Starport Club, VIP room 8. 16 people, 13 phones recording. "When you forced me to my knees, did you ever stop to think about crossing the line?" Her lips trembled. That was different, the moment those 3 words left her mouth. The air in the living room turned ice cold. I stared her down. How exactly is it different? She couldn't utter a single word. I took a half step forward. "Is it because I was the live-in son-in-law? Because I leached off the Lu family? Because you held my father's company by the throat? So you just saw me as the Lu family's loyal dog, expected to do whatever the hell you ordered? You really thought you were so far above me. So, it was perfectly fine for me to kneel, but God forbid you do the same?" Lu Ruyan's tears finally fell, hitting the torn pieces of the agreement. She frantically shook her head. "No, that's not what I meant." "Bullshit, that is exactly what you meant." I snatched another folder off the coffee table and slammed it down at her feet. "These are all the times I took the fall for you over the past 3 years. The drunk driving statement, the leaked project files, the client kickbacks, cleaning up Lu Ruoyu's massive debts. Every single one of them. You knew damn well he was framed for all of it." Her tears stopped dead in their tracks. She started trembling uncontrollably, because right there in the files were her own signatures. "I've got the recordings, and the emails." She finally dropped the innocent victim act. She was terrified. Lu Ruyan asked, her voice shaking, Where did you get these?" I replied, "That is none of your damn business." She bent down to pick them up, but I planted my foot right on the edge of the papers and said, "Kneel, or get the hell out." She froze in place. A few seconds passed. Slowly, she bent her knees. A collective gasp echoed through the G family's living room. Just as her knees were about to touch the carpet, her phone rang. She stopped dead in her tracks, frantically scrambling to pull out her phone. The screen flashed Lu Ruji's name. She picked it up, gasping. "Brother." Through the speaker, Lu Ruji's voice boomed out. "Stand up. Do not kneel." Lu Ruyan looked up at me, a glimmer of hope returning to her eyes like she just grabbed a lifeline. Lu Ruji continued, "Chi Boda, I can't give you what you're asking for, but I've prepared another grand gift for you." I snatched the phone from her hand and said, "Spit it out." He replied, "Your father's car crash back then wasn't an accident." I froze for a second. In the original host's memories, after Father G's fatal crash, the company completely collapsed. Chi Boda was practically sold off into an arranged marriage. Lu Ruji lowered his voice to a whisper. "Want to know who did it? Tonight, at 8 o'clock, meet me at the old port warehouse. Come alone." The line went dead. Lu Ruyan stood before me, tears still clinging to her chin. Suddenly springing back to life, she sneered, "Chi Boda, I had absolutely nothing to do with that." I glared at her. "For your sake, you'd better hope you didn't." The old port warehouse sat right against the abandoned docks, its iron doors rusted completely black. The stench of seawater and heavy diesel forced its way into my lungs. I walked inside, entirely alone. Inside the massive warehouse, only 2 dim lights flickered overhead. The pale glow barely lit up the ground beneath my feet, leaving the corners drowning in deep shadows. A biting wind whistled through the gaps between the old shipping containers, making the corrugated iron rattle and groan. Lu Ruji was standing under the light. He had 4 men flanking him. He didn't bring Lu Rian. I quickly swept my eyes over the 4 guys. Their stance was very specific. These weren't your run-of-the-mill bodyguards. Their hands were tucked under their jackets, shoulders slightly lowered. You could tell at a glance they were trained killers. Lu Ruji calmly rolled a string of prayer beads between his fingers and said, "You actually had the guts to show up." I casually slipped off my jacket, tossing it onto a wooden crate nearby, and asked, "Where is the intel?" He raised his hand. One of the men behind him tossed over a thick manila envelope. It landed right at my feet. I didn't bother picking it up. Lu Ruji let out a dark chuckle. He asked, "What's wrong? Are you scared?" I looked him dead in the eye and smirked. "What a stupid question. You brought 4 guys, and I am all alone. I really do not know who is supposed to be scared here." The smile on his face faded. "Chi Boda, I looked into you. You have been weak as a kid in your whole life. Never even heard a fly, let alone trained in combat. But the way you have been acting these past few days doesn't match your file at all." I cracked my wrists and said, "And then what?" He asked. "So, I want to see who you really are." I let out a laugh and said, "Go ask your sister. Didn't she tell you last night?" I have lost my damn mind. Lu Ruo took half a step back and commanded, "Do it." All 4 guys rushed me at once. The one in front whipped out a baton from under his shirt and brought it down hard toward my shoulder. I dodged to the side, closed the distance in one smooth motion, and drove my elbow hard into his ribs. He let out a muffled grunt, his whole body instantly going limp. I grabbed his wrist, snatched the baton, and backhanded it right into the back of his knee. His legs gave out, and he dropped to his knees right then and there. Number 2 came at me from the side, his fist grazing right past my ear. I caught his wrist bone, twisted my body to use his momentum, and hurled his entire body into the shipping container. With a deafening thud, the metal rattled, raining down a cloud of dust. Number 3 was the most vicious. With a flash of cold steel, a blade slipped from his sleeve, aiming straight for my gut. I planted my feet. I didn't back down. Instead, I stepped right into it. The blade sliced through my shirt, the icy touch scraping right across my skin. I locked onto his wrist and snapped it violently upward. With a sharp clink, the blade hit the floor. I immediately planted a kick dead in his chest, sending him flying backward. He smashed through the wooden crates behind him, curling up on the ground and coughing up a mouthful of red. But the very next second, my neck suddenly tightened. Number 4 looped a rope around me from behind, choking my throat tight. My breath was instantly cut off. Countless bright spots exploded in my vision. I grabbed the rope with both hands, and stomped my heel ruthlessly down onto his foot. At the same time, I whipped my head back, smashing right into the bridge of his nose. A scream tore out from behind me, and the rope instantly went slack. I spun around, snatched the rope, and whipped it backward around his neck. I grabbed the back of his head, and slammed his face hard into the concrete. Once, twice, the warehouse fell dead silent. He was sprawled on the ground, completely motionless. Now, don't get the wrong idea. He just passed out. I took a deep breath, the taste of copper filling my mouth. Lu Ruo stood under the light, no longer rolling the prayer beads in his hand. For the first time, a look of pure terror washed over his face. I picked up the baton from the floor, and walked toward him, step by step. Backing away, he stammered, "Chi Boda, walk away now, while you still can." I tapped my baton against the concrete, the metal tip echoing with a sharp, rhythmic clack. I looked at him and said, "The files." He glanced at the paper bag by his feet and replied, "The bank statements for the driver from the crash are in there." Someone wired his family 5 million back then. I bent down to grab the bag. Right then, one of the overhead lights flickered out, and footsteps echoed from the dark corner of the warehouse. I turned my head. Ji Bo-chang stepped out of the shadows, dangling a set of car keys in his hand. I locked eyes with him. "You're with him?" Lu Ruji let out a laugh, his face full of smug satisfaction. "Ji Boda, did you honestly think anyone in the Ji family wants you to win?" Ji Bo-chang didn't even look at Lu Ruji. He kept his eyes on me. That car crash back then wasn't the Lu family's doing. My grip tightened on the paper bag. Ji Bo-chang's voice dropped. It was the Ji family. A cold draft slipped through the cracks of the warehouse doors, rustling the paper bag in my hand. I glared at him. "Explain, now." Ji Bo-chang's voice was heavy. "Your father found out the main branch of the Ji family was cooking the books. He was going to hand the proof over to the regulators. The old man couldn't stop him, so after the crash, the evidence vanished. The Lu family just took advantage of the chaos, forcing the Ji family into an arranged marriage." Lu Ruji chimed in. "You've been hating the wrong people this whole time." I shot him a cold look. "Don't try to play the innocent victim here." He just shrugged. "Sure, the Lu family dragged your name through the mud, but the ones who took out your father weren't us." I turned my attention back to Ji Bo-chang. "So, why are you here tonight? To save my skin, or to silence me?" Ji Bo-chang tossed the car keys in my direction. "There's a car parked outside. The files are legit. They've got the payoff records to the driver's family, and the Ji family's shadow ledgers. That's all I can give you." I caught the keys mid-air. "Why?" Ji Bo-chang fell silent for a heartbeat. Then he said, "Because my dad died in that same cover-up." The words hung heavy in the air. The only sound left in the warehouse was the rattling of the metal siding. Lu Ruji's face drained of color. He clearly didn't expect Ji Bo-chang to flip on him. A second later, police sirens wailed outside. Lu Ruji whipped his head around. Ji Bo-chang just stated, "I called the cops." Lu Ruji's eyes turned lethal. Ji Bo-chang backed up to stand shoulder to shoulder with me. "Boss Lu, hiring thugs for a hit is more than enough to lock you away for a good, long time." Lu Ruji glared daggers at us, his grip so tight the prayer beads in his palm snapped. The dark wooden beads scattered across the floor, bouncing in every direction. I stepped toward him, winding up my baton like I was going to swing, but slammed it brutally into the wooden crate right next to him. He flinched, stumbling backward instinctively. His heel caught on a loose bead, and he crashed hard onto the concrete. I leaned over, looking down at him. Scared, his face twisted for a split second. Then, the cops stormed into the warehouse. I dropped my baton, put my hands up in the air, and said, "I'll cooperate with the investigation." Lu Ruji glared at me, his jaw clenching so hard his teeth clicked. I just smiled at him and said, "Don't even think about finding a fall guy this time." The Regong warehouse incident blew up fast. Lu Ruji had asked me to meet, but brought 4 thugs with him. The place was littered with all kinds of weapons and blades. When the police showed up, all 4 thugs were injured. The warehouse security footage, the emergency call logs, and Ji Bo-chang's statement all backed up my story perfectly. I was pretty banged up too. I had strangulation marks around my neck, a nasty cut on my side, and the back of my hands were scraped raw. There was no way the Lu family could just sweep this under the rug this time. Lu Ruji was slapped with administrative detention before making bail, looking at charges for instigating intentional assault. 2 of the 4 thugs had prior records. They confessed they were just hired muscle, paid to scare me, and swore they had no idea who was pulling the strings. The money trail led to a shell company. Digging deeper into that shell company, it pointed straight to a vice president at the Lu Corporation. Lu Ruji was trying to pin it on another scapegoat, but the Lu family's walls were already crumbling down. Ito Makoto was the first to crack. During his second interrogation at the police station, he completely turned on Lu Rian. The drugging, the blackmail, the hidden cameras, he spilled everything. The reason was simple. The Ito family needed to save their own company. They were planning to ship him overseas until things cooled down, and even tried to force him to publicly confess that all the previous mess was entirely his own doing. He realized he was just a sacrificial pawn, and a cornered dog will always bite back. The day Lu Rian was summoned by the police, I was sitting in my car, watching her walk out of the Lu Corporation building. She was wearing a sharp black suit, but her face looked absolutely drained. There was even a faint scar near her temple. A swarm of reporters surrounded her, shouting, "Ms. Lu, Ito Makoto claims you knew about the drugging. Is it true? Have you been blackmailing your ex-husband all this time? What's going to happen with your divorce from Mr. G?" Lu Rian just kept her head down, as her bodyguards tried to shield her on the way to her car. Suddenly, someone yelled out, "Lu Rian, when you forced Ji Boda to get on his knees, did you ever think this day would come?" She froze in her tracks. I sat in the car, watching her through the tinted glass. Hearing my name seemed to trigger something. She slowly raised her head, her eyes frantically searching through the crowd. And then, she spotted my car. She shoved her bodyguards aside, and started walking straight towards me. Ji Bo-chan, sitting up in the driver's seat, muttered under his breath, "Should we just drive off?" I just said, no need. Lu Rian walked right up to the window, and knocked. He rolled the window down. Instantly, all the noise from the street flooded in. The shouting reporters, the rapid-fire camera shutters, the blaring car horns. It all blended into one chaotic mess. Lu Rian just stared at me. Her eyes were red and welling up with tears as she whispered, Ji Boda. I just finished giving my statement. I didn't say a word back. With her hands clasped in front of her, she said, I admit it. I admit, I knew Ito Makoto was going to spike your drink that night. And I admit, I forced you to sign that agreement. The cameras all crowded in around her. Her voice was trembling, but she didn't shrink back. She said, I've done so many things wrong in the past. I took your patience, completely for granted. I cut off every single way out for you, and even used your father's company to force you to yield. She took a deep breath, and her knees slowly began to bend. The crowd instantly exploded into an uproar. Lu Rian was kneeling right beside the car, as if she had finally drained the very last ounce of her strength, her back slowly hunched over. Her shoulders completely slumped in defeat. She said, I'm so sorry. The rapid clicking of camera shutters blended into a continuous roar. Lu Rian knelt by the car, looking up at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. Ji Boda, I know you won't ever forgive me, her voice trembled. But, do we really have to destroy each other like this? I looked down at her with cold eyes. Once, in that private room, the original owner of this body had knelt right in front of her. She had remained completely unmoved. At the annual gala, when the original owner had wine thrown in his face in front of everyone, she just stood there and watched with cold, dead eyes. Even in the hospital corridor, she was absolutely certain that he would come crawling back sooner or later, begging her on his knees. But now, she was the one finally kneeling. What a pity, it was far too late. The man she wanted to see kneel was already dead. I took the folder from Ji Bochang's hands, held it out in front of her, and said flatly, sign it. Lu Rian looked down at the documents. A divorce agreement. The terms were brutally simple and clear. Admitting to major faults during the marriage. Paying me massive financial compensation. Lifting absolutely every restriction against my father's company. And fully cooperating to clear up all the false rumors spread over the past 3 years. She reached out to take the papers. Her fingertips were shaking so violently she could barely hold the pages. Lu Rian asked weakly, If I sign this, will you let the Lu family off the hook? I chuckled coldly. You think you're still in a position to negotiate? The very last trace of color instantly drained from her face. I went to pull the agreement back, pretending to roll up the car window. I'll sign. She frantically yelled to stop me, and snatched up the pen. She signed it right against the car window. The tip of the pen pressed so hard it tore right through the paper. The final stroke of her name was terribly crooked. She handed the agreement back to me, looking at me through blurry, tear-filled eyes, and said, Ji Boda, I truly regret it. My gaze coldly dropped to the hand she used to hold the agreement. It was that exact same hand that had once smashed a divorce agreement right into his face. That threw an ashtray at my head, and that personally pushed that spiked glass of wine right in front of me. I took the papers from her, and said flatly, your regrets are your own business. But whether or not I forgive you, is mine. She stared at me in an absolute daze. The very last shred of hope in her eyes slowly withered away. I rolled up the window. The dark glass slowly glided shut, completely shutting her out of my world. She remained kneeling right there on the ground, her pale lips trembling as they moved. It sounded like she was calling my name, but I just ignored it. As Ji Bochang drove the car out of the crowd, I saw Lu Rian in the rearview mirror, completely swarmed by reporters. She tried to stand up, but her legs just didn't have the strength. She barely got up before collapsing right back down. With so many people around her, not a single person reached out to help her. The Ji family's ledgers were far more rotten than the Lu family's. In the files Ji Bochang gave me, there were records from 10 years ago of the main Ji family inflating profits, forging contracts, and dodging taxes. There was also a partial recording left by the original host's father, right before his fatal car crash. In the audio, his voice was hoarse as he said, Dad, if we keep cooking the books like this, something bad is bound to happen. After a brief silence, an old, raspy voice replied, You handing those files over? Are you trying to destroy the Ji family? He answered, I am trying to save the Ji family. A second later, the sharp crash of a shattering teacup rang out. If you dare hand those files over, I will disown you. The recording abruptly cut off there. I sat in the study, and listened to it 3 times in a row. Just as the third replay ended, the door was pushed open. Old Master Ji stood at the doorway, leaning heavily on his cane, with his assistant and caretaker right behind him. When he saw the files spread across my desk, his face immediately darkened. Ji Bochang gave you those. I clicked off the recording pen and asked, Was it you? He didn't answer, only staring blankly at the recording pen. After a long while, he spoke slowly. No, the car crash was not my doing. I glared at him. But you found out exactly who did it the moment you checked, didn't you? His lips pressed into a tight line. At that time, The G family could not be allowed to fall. I slowly stood up from my chair. So my father just had to die? He slammed his cane hard against the floor, his voice raising to a shout. Your father was a part of this family, too. If he had handed over those files, the entire G family would have been utterly destroyed. So many businesses, so many employees. Were they all supposed to go down with him? I walked right up to him. So he died. The G family was saved. And then, you all just turned around and sent his only son to the Liu family, making him act as your obedient little dog in their house. The old man's face drained of color, turning pale and ashen. He gritted his teeth. G Boda, don't you forget. You are a G, too. I let out a cold laugh. And what exactly has this surname ever given me? He raised his hand to slap me, but I caught his wrist mid-air. His skin was loose and wrinkled, the bones of his wrists so thin they dug into my palm. I barely even squeezed, yet he still gasped in pain. He hissed through his teeth. What? Are you going to hit me now? I just looked down at him. You're too old. You wouldn't survive a beating. A faint look of relief flashed in his eyes. He probably thought I'd still care about our blood ties. But a second later, I told him, so, I'm planning to send you to prison. His eyes went wide. What did you just say? I picked up the file and said, tax evasion, forged contracts, and deliberately covering up a major accident. Any one of these is enough to guarantee you'll be spending the rest of your retirement behind bars. The old man's breathing suddenly grew heavy. Ji Bo-chang, he roared toward the door. Ji Bo-chang quickly stepped into the study. The old man grabbed his cane and pointed it straight at him, his arm trembling violently. Are you betraying me too? Ji Bo-chang walked over to stand by my side and said, Grandpa, if the Ji family doesn't come clean now, these dirty secrets will drag us all down eventually. The old man was gasping, his chest heaving rapidly. I am your grandfather. Ji Bo-chang's eyes were red. He forced the words out, one by one. And my dad was your son. The old man looked as if those words had grabbed him by the throat. He stared at Ji Bo-chang, then at me, unable to utter a single word for a long time. I picked up the folder and said, tomorrow morning, these files will be handed over to our lawyers, the tax bureau, and financial regulators. You can spend tonight calling in favors. You can try moving your assets, or you can even fake a heart attack and hide in a hospital. I walked to the door and paused. But just remember one thing, I said. The old Ji Boda might have cared about family. He might have stayed and taken care of you in your old age. But I won't. The cane slipped from the old man's hands and clattered to the floor. He stumbled backward, caught just in time by a panicking nurse. He just kept muttering the same thing over and over. You've all turned against me. You've all turned against me. Ji Bo-chan looked down and picked up the cane, but he didn't hand it back. Instead, he gently leaned it against the wall and said, Grandpa, it's time to pay for what you've done. The very next morning, the G Corporation issued an emergency press release, voluntarily disclosing their past financial fraud. Regulators immediately opened an investigation. Tax officials and financial police raided the headquarters. Several of my uncles from the main family branch were hauled away for questioning. Travel bans were placed on all key executives, and Ji Bo-chang's father's fatal car crash from years ago was finally reopened. The driver involved had died of illness years ago, but his wife had received 5 million yuan right after the accident. The bank records of her buying a house in cash were still intact. The money had been laundered through multiple private accounts, ultimately tracing back to a shell company under the G Corporation, one that had been dissolved a long time ago. And the true owner of that shell company? The old man's eldest son. When Ji Bo-chan heard the news in the boardroom, he just sat there in dead silence for a long time. He didn't shed a single tear. He just took off his glasses and pressed his fingers hard against the bridge of his nose. I slid my pack of cigarettes over to him. He shook his head. After my dad died, I always thought the Liu family drove him to his grave. I looked at him and said, well, now you know the truth. He nodded slowly. Yeah, the rot started from within the Ji family. Outside the window, the sky was dark and heavy. Our reflections mirrored perfectly against the glass. Ji Bo-chan broke the silence and asked, what's your next move? I stared at the 3 documents on the desk. Liu Rian's divorce papers, the investigation file on the Liu family, and the old ledgers from the Ji family. I said, time to wrap this up. Ji Bo-chan looked up. I held a cigarette between my lips, unlit. I told him, none of them are walking away from this with their dignity intact. The day of the trial was dark and overcast. The courthouse steps were crowded. Liu Rian was there. Makoto Ito showed up too. They both looked absolutely miserable. For illegal possession and use of psychotropic drugs, assault, and extortion. Makoto Ito's case was handled separately. Since he hadn't caused severe physical damage, and had turned himself in, he ended up getting a suspended sentence and a fine. The Ito family completely abandoned him. His father slapped him across the face in public, and kicked him out of the house. All of his shares and bank accounts were frozen due to the other pending investigations. As for his injured right hand, they managed to save it, but the nerve damage was permanent. It shook uncontrollably whenever he tried to hold a pen. Out in the hallway after the hearing, he spotted me from down the hall. He stopped dead in his tracks. I walked straight toward him. He backed up against the wall, his lips trembling violently. Boda, I did everything you said. I've paid the price. I stared down at his twitching hand, and I said, it's not enough. Tears immediately spilled down his face. My dad disowned me. The Ito family abandoned me. I have absolutely nothing left. I stepped closer to him. You still have your pathetic life. He was so terrified he could barely form words. I just smiled, patting his cheek. Don't be scared. We live in a civilized society. I'm not going to lay a finger on you. He opened his eyes wide, absolutely bloodshot and terrified. I said, from now on, every time you wake up and look at that crippled hand, you'll remember exactly how you ruined your own life. That's more than enough for me. Makoto Ito slowly slid down the wall until he hit the floor, muttering mechanically over and over. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. At the other end of the hallway, Lu Rian was standing alone by the window. She looked even more emaciated than the last time I saw her. Her black coat hung loosely off her frail frame. She was clutching a silver bracelet tightly in her hand. It was a gift from the original owner of this body. A cheap little string of silver beads, with her initials engraved in the middle. It wasn't worth much, but he had scraped together what little savings he had just to buy it for her. Back then, when she took it, she had casually tossed it into a drawer. And now, she was finally bringing it out. But it was far too late. Lu Rian walked up to me and said softly, Boda. I stopped walking. She opened her palm and held the bracelet out to me. I kept this. All this time, I barely even gave it a glance. I just said, throw it away. Her hand froze right there in midair. After a long silence, she finally spoke. I know I have no right to bring this up. I just happened to find it recently. And it reminded me of how well you used to treat me. I looked at her, tilted my head, and said, thinking about all that now. What's the point? Her eyes began to well up with tears. She whispered, there is no point. I replied coldly, glad you know. She lowered her head, her tears dropping heavily onto the silver beads. She said, the Lu group has been hit with massive fines. So many of our projects are shut down. And my brother, he's going to prison. My mom was begging me just last night to come see you. She said, if you'd just agree to withdraw some of the evidence, our family might still have a chance to survive. I asked, so, you're here to beg me? She shook her head. I know you'd never agree to that. Then why are you even here? She looked up at me, her voice barely a whisper, as she said, to hear it from your own mouth. That you will never forgive me. I chuckled, and asked, are you out of your mind? She gave a small, sad smile, even as the tears kept falling. Maybe I am, she said. Back then, when you were always chasing after me, trying to explain yourself. I just found it annoying. Now the tables have turned. Here I am, chasing after you, just to hear an answer I already know. I didn't reply to that. The courtroom doors suddenly opened. A clerk stood at the entrance calling out names. I turned around and started walking in. Suddenly, Lu Rian called out from behind me. Boda, I am so sorry. I stopped in my tracks. But I didn't look back. I simply said, the man you're apologizing to is already dead. There was only dead silence behind me. On the day of the sentencing, the court found Lu Ruji guilty of instigating assault, tampering with witnesses, and ordering his subordinates to hide key evidence. He was hit with multiple charges. The Lu group was also slapped with massive fines for countless financial and operational violations, and several core projects were completely shut down. When Lu Ruji was escorted out of the courtroom by the bailiffs, his suit was still perfectly crisp. But the Buddhist prayer beads were gone from his wrist, replaced by a pair of cold, steel handcuffs. As he walked past me, he stopped for a moment. Boda, you really think you've won? I glanced down at the cuffs on his wrists and smiled. I don't know if I've won, but I do know, you lost. And that's enough for me. His jaw twitched slightly. He looked like he wanted to spit out a threat, but in the end, he just said, the Lu family won't go down that easily. I nodded at him and said, that's fine, then I'll just watch it slowly crumble. The bailiffs shoved him into the back of the police cruiser. Just before the doors slammed shut, he finally turned his head to look at Lu Rian, who was waiting at the bottom of the steps. She just stood there, looking completely pale and lifeless. As the police cruiser drove off, she stayed completely still, right until the back of the car disappeared around the street corner. Only then did she slowly collapse, as if she had suddenly lost all her support. The reporters quickly swarmed her. She covered her face, her shoulders trembling uncontrollably, and mumbled, brother, please don't leave me. But this time, no one was there to clean up her mess. As for the G family, Old Man G couldn't dodge the investigation. The last time I went to see him, he was lying in the hospital, undergoing questioning. His hair was thin and snow white, and his whole body seemed to sink into the hospital bed. A man who could once dictate someone's fate with a single word, now needed a nurse's help just to lift a glass of water. Seeing me walk in, his cloudy eyes suddenly lit up. Boda, you came. I set a family asset division and restructuring agreement down on his nightstand. I said, sign it. He stared at the agreement, his hands shaking violently. Do you really have to be this ruthless? I leaned in, and shoved the pen into his hand. When you signed the papers back then, to send me off to the Liu family, were your hands shaking this much? Tears streamed down his face as he choked out, I can't sign it. I grabbed his hand and forced him down to sign the paper. Oh, you can. The tip of the pen scratched across the paper. His signature was crooked and wobbly. The moment he finished, it was as if all his strength had been sucked out of him, and he slumped back onto the pillows. The G family is finished. I picked up the agreement and replied, it's not the G family that's finished. I looked right at him and said, it's you who are finished. By the time I left the hospital, the rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet. Car headlights rolled over the puddles, shattering the light that rippled out along my feet. Ji Bo-chan was waiting for me at the entrance. He asked, where to next? I tossed the agreement to him and said, strip out the clean parts of the G group's business. You take charge of those. As for the dirty ones, hand over whatever needs to be handed over to the authorities. Pay off whatever needs to be paid off. He caught the files, and asked, what about you? I looked up at the rain-washed night sky. This city was full of towering skyscrapers, blazing with light, but in the places those lights couldn't reach, there were still rotten deals hiding in the dark, and people forced to bow their heads. And there were still those who trampled others underfoot, thinking they would never take a fall themselves. I raised my hand and touched the scabbed wound by my ear. I said, I'm thinking of starting a company. Ji Bo-chan raised his eyebrows. Doing what? I smiled. I said, specializing in putting people in their place. He stared at me, and after a long moment, he smiled too. My phone buzzed right then. It was a message from Liu Rian. It read, I'm at the Starlight Harbor Club, private room number 8. The next message read, I'll be waiting for you on my knees. I took one look at it, and blocked her. Ji Bo-chan asked, you're not going? I slipped my phone into my pocket. I said, how is a dead man supposed to show up? I pulled open the car door, and slid into the back seat. The car pulled away from the hospital, cruising down the wet streets. Up ahead, the red light flipped to green. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. Images flashed through my mind. The thick carpet in the private room, the rattling sheet metal in the warehouse. And the way the original owner kept his head bowed for so long when he was forced to his knees. In the end, all those memories froze on the exact moment I grabbed that liquor bottle and smashed it down with everything I had. The sound of the glass shattering was crisp and clean, like it had violently split 2 lifetimes wide open. From that moment on, Ji Boda would never have to kneel to anyone ever again, and I was done living for a dead man. I opened my eyes, watching the city lights blur past the window. The fire burning in my chest hadn't gone out yet. For the long road ahead, I was still going to need it.